What's good, everyone? Hey, thank you for coming in tonight. I have a very special guest. I have Kamau Franklin, a very revolutionary brother that's been doing this grassroots things for a long time. So, before we jump into that, I just want to welcome everyone. Please be sure to subscribe, like, share this video. Especially, we still trying to grow the channel. Still fairly new. We're being more consistent with bringing you great guests like today, mostly stuff containing to the revolutionary struggle. So please like, share, and subscribe this video, regardless of when you watch it. Please help a brother out and do that. Let's get the message out. But right now, we're gonna jump into this. The leader of community movement builders, based out of Atlanta. They nationwide, international. So I'm gonna just give you the floor right now. Kamau, introduce yourself to the people that may not know you. Tell us a little bit, a brief introduction. I'm gonna have some questions for you, but let people know a little bit about you, your past, and what you're doing out there in Atlanta.
Sure. First, thanks for having me, bro. I really appreciate it. I know about the good work that Black Empowerment Movement is doing, and so it's always a pleasure to share screen and share time with you. So my name is Kamau Franklin. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York. Grew up first 40 years of my life. Let me not try to lie. 40 years of my life. I've been an organizer for over 30 years, mostly grassroots organizing. Revolutionary nationalism is a basic platform or ideological belief system that I follow. Also, in the past, I've been a practicing attorney for like 10, 11 years. Did a lot of criminal civil rights cases. Went down to Jackson, Mississippi at one point and worked on what became euphemistically known as the Jackson Plan, and something that people on the left of the political spectrum kind of know about some of that work. And came back to Atlanta probably about 10 years ago. And 5 or 6 years later, started Community Movement Builders. Community Movement Builders is a grassroots organization. We do community organizing. We organize around the issue of police brutality and misconduct. We also organize around the issue of gentrification, which is taking place around the country, of course, and hitting Atlanta particularly hard. And on the other side, we do what we call sustainability work. And that sustainability work consists of developing cooperatives, so alternative business enterprises, i.e. some socialistic work. We also have a mutual aid program where we give food and toiletries to folks in the community as they need them. We have a community stabilization fund where folks are short on rent, utilities, mortgage. We help support them that way. We do a cop watch and safety patrol in the community. And then last but not least, we also do some international work. We have a Pan-African solidarity network. And right now we do a lot of work in Haiti, helping to construct a community center, a grassroots community center, by providing some funding to a Haitian Socialist Party down there. So that's what we do in a nutshell. Yeah.
Man, now that's a lot. So I want to take it back to the beginning, because I know you have a background with doing things in Jackson, Mississippi. You said that was with the Malcolm X grassroots movement.
Yes, sir.
Correct?
Malcolm X grassroots movement. Yes.
All right. So tell me about, how did CMB come about then? How did community movement builders come about?
Well, after I left Jackson, Mississippi, part of my reason for leaving Jackson was that after 18 years, I also left the Malcolm X grassroots movement, and really was sort of searching for what I would do next, organizing wise, if anything. I was already, I guess, in my mid 40s, and I thought maybe I was get a retirement job and do a little like nonprofit work and stuff like that. And I kept butting heads anytime I got a job working in the nonprofit area. And so finally I decided I still wanted to do movement work. At one point, there was a donor who offered resources, and those resources were to buy a house of our choosing. And this was like 6 years ago, for $60,000 in the Pittsburgh area of Atlanta, which is a working class, poor Black neighborhood. And we did that, and slowly but surely during that time period. And a lot of the principles are similar to MXG. I believe in that organizing, even though I wasn't with the organization anymore. I believed in sort of revolutionary nationalism ideas. I believed in creating liberated territory. I believe in self-determination, that we got to control as a people, institutions, programs, organizations that we are in charge of, that we run, that fit into an ethos that's made to build our community, our nation, our people. And so I still believe in that, and I base the organization that we created on that similar mantra. So that's how Community Movement Builders got started 5 or 6 years ago. And as you stated, we have chapters in Detroit, San Diego. We have a little fledgling chapter in Dallas, and in a couple of other places. But we're looking to do that work all over the country and internationally. So yeah.
You kind of went into my next point of what is the mission of CMB, and you kind of explained it. You mentioned one of the key words is revolutionary nationalists. You did say revolutionary nationalists, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right, and then self-determination. And when you say those things, like a lot of times, we, we've been in the movement so long, those words automatically mean something. So, but to someone that's new, could you pick one of those terms, or go through all of them and explain what that means? Because somebody new, because we have, as we know, we have a lot of new people that's interested in getting involved in the movement. I think sometimes those we get used to saying those words, and a lot of times people may not have the political education or the study to know what those words mean. Can you break that down?
Yeah.
You don't mind?
No, I think you're exactly right. Sometimes, particularly as old heads, we just assume things, and I think you're right. It's always good to slow it down and make sure everybody's on the same page. So when we say revolutionary nationalism, what we basically mean is that we're anti-capitalist, right? We think the system of capitalism is part of and/or a main reason behind our oppression. And the only way to defeat that is through a revolutionary change in the economic order, i.e., getting rid of capitalism and ushering in socialism. So that's part of our ideology. The other part of the ideology, the nationalism, comes in, and when we say we need to control institutions, organizations, government entities, anything that has power over our lives, we as a people need to control that. It can't be something where anybody has the power to jail us, imprison us, decide on what's good for us educationally wise, what's good for us medically speaking, what social institutions we need to take part of. We need to make those decisions for ourselves as a people. Hence the idea of revolutionary nationalism. Actually, it was a coin termed in the early 1970s, maybe even late 60s, by Harold Cruz, famous writer who wrote the Crisis of the Negro Intellectual. So it's been around for a long time, and it's a way of saying, again, that your politics are counter to the racism and white supremacy that we encounter. And even though those politics, there may be a long view to them, by having those politics, it helps you decide what your day-to-day work is. It helps you decide which way forward in terms of creating programs for your community, in terms of what organizing you're going to do in the community, and what alternative economics programs or systems you're going to try to set up. The other thing, which is closely related, is self-determination. So again, self-determination is a right that all people have, right? To make decisions for themselves and not to be oppressed, not to be colonized, not to have imperialism strike on them. So whether or not that's an international idea, but that also applies to us as a people locally, that again, we have the right, the human right, and self-determination is recognized as a human right, as a people, to make decisions for ourselves that impact not only our community, but our larger body politic, let's say, within the United States. And I should also say we're Pan-African, which means we think that we as a people connect to the struggle in Africa, the struggle in Jamaica, the struggle in Haiti, that we as a people are connected. When our, ancestors were brought to these shores, we weren't brought here as Jamaicans, as Puerto Ricans, as Dominicans, as Haitians. We were brought here from various African communities and were settled here. And we think part of our liberation struggle is to have to have the idea that we are all connected and need to work together against the common enemy. And what's that common enemy? Western imperialism, Western capitalism that dominates our people and other people around the globe.
Wow, wow, and and I think this is, I guess, an age old question we always find ourselves asking is, we at the end of the day we want self determination, and we want to control and have control for ourselves and have sovereignty and have land. But what how can we go about that when first of all the whole, not the whole, but most of the whole world is capitalistic. We live in a one of the number one capitalistic country in the world, and how can us as being prisoners of war in this country, how can we fight and strive for those things when we are ourselves living in a capitalistic world within the number one capitalistic country in the world? Like, it seems like a daunting task to overtake, and I think sometimes we get in the mindset, like we look at the big picture, like, oh my God, this is too hard of a challenge, and we just like, well, that just, that just settle for being comfortable in this situation that we in. What would you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say one, it is a daunting task. There's no doubt about it. But I think when you look at the legacy of us as a people and what we've been through many daunting tasks, many daunting situations. And again, not only here, but around the world. And when we look at what's taken place to our people, in my estimation, we have no choice but to fight back. We have no
Mm,
choice but to struggle to make sure that that oppression is something that in some way or form we either lessen and or we end. And I think the history of our people is one of struggling against that oppression. And whether or not that means overcoming great odds or not, there's a history of struggle that we, basically a history of resistance that we are very much connected to, and that is ongoing. And it manifests itself in many different ways. One of the ways it does for me is through the politics I talked about around revolutionary nationalism. Some people do it through voting. Some people do it through electoral politics, right? And I think that there's a place for that, but that may be a little too integrationist minded, right? But Black folks have been fighting for what we would call freedom and or liberation since we got here in some form or mechanism. So that fight is ongoing. One, two, the reason why folks have control is because they've built the necessary institutions and organizations and military apparatus and other apparatus that have allowed them to take control. But we must always remember these folks are human. There's nothing special
yeah,
about them. There's nothing superior about them. They've built things. They themselves have had infights with each other, but they've now built a system that allows them to control. That doesn't mean that system will always exist. And the only way that that system would be broken is if people gear up and fight against that system. And again, that's already happened, right? That's happened in decolonization struggles all around the world, in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia. That's happened with um, um, alternative poles of power in the world, with the creation of the Soviet Union at one point, which gave aid to some of that decolonization movements. Even currently, there's different sectors of the world which is still turning to socialism or turning to other isms that are not within the capitalist orbit, in which the capitalists then try to punish them for, i.e., Iran, or in some ways Syria or Hezbollah. Look at China. China's trying to break out of a purely Western dominated capitalist mode. Not that it is itself, although it calls itself socialism, is using a lot of capitalist economic means, but it's teaming that with some state control over resources, right? So there's many
hmm,
examples of people who or people or nation states. China 50 years ago was a very poor nation state, right? But China
hmm,
did, and even though it had the largest population in the world, it didn't stay that way, right? History is dynamic, history is changing, and so it's up to people who believe that they can be a part of the change of history, to gather together, to figure out what our issues are, to come together for common goals, to work together, to create larger organizations, again, both nationally and internationally, to struggle against the thing that's oppressing us. Otherwise, and I'll end on this, otherwise, we're just giving up.
yeah,
Otherwise, we're succumbing to, like you said, the kidnappers who brought us here, right? So basically, we're living a Stockholm syndrome if we give up. We're saying that we're going to start identifying with the people who kidnapped us, who stripped our people of our identity, who literally murdered millions of our people, who literally raped people, who literally lynched our people, who literally locked us up in prisons and institutions, right? Who created laws to make us so-called second-class citizens, right? So either we're going to succumb to that and act like we forgot all of that, or we're going to struggle. Because if we don't struggle, somebody else will always have power over us as a people. And so that's something that we need to break away from. We need to understand that it's not an easy task. It's not a light task. It's not something that's going to happen overnight, but it is something that if we put our mind to, like any people, we can struggle against oppression and at some point win.
Oh wow, and I'm glad you said it because that goes to another interesting point because you mentioned that we need to struggle. We can't succumb to just uh, giving in. Then they win per se. But me ask you this: as vanguards, and I consider you a vanguard, as someone that's a vanguard,
Mm.
is it more important to yeah you are to reach out to other like-minded individuals that's our vanguards or on that same mission, or is it a general goal to spark the minds of the masses of the people and get them behind the vanguard, or should it need to be a mixture of both? How you feel about that?
Yeah, I don't think those things are exclusive, right? I think those
Okay.
things have to happen at the same time. You have to have people who are already politicized, who understand the nature of the struggle, and who are willing to do the work. But you also have to keep in mind that that's a limited crew of people. That it is the quote unquote masses who make history, and those masses need to be supported in terms of organizing. They need to have support with political education. People will each one teach one, so folks will learn and teach and learn and gather information from each other. But it's only through the struggle of gathering more people, right? It's the masses that our organizations need, and so that's why, for instance, Community Movement Builders is a mass-based organization. It doesn't mean that we're not having folks who are training, let's say, for cadre work, right? For work that's really based on sort of a certain ideological development. But it also means that we know that those things aren't mutually exclusive, right? Without mass support, a cadre is just a small clique of people who really can't move anything. And as you
Mm.
can see in the world, even if you consider somebody to be vanguard or cadre, most of those folks have armies behind them, which are made up of the masses, right? Most of those folks have other institutions and there's workers and so forth and so on. So I'm not saying that to differentiate people between a sort of elite or vanguard and the workers, but what I'm saying is that the people have to work together, whether or not some are officially leadership or not. But the people have to work together if they're going to overcome the oppression that we suffer as a people.
and, and I'm gonna be honest, what you're saying is very true, but I think it's compared to times in the past, it's a lot harder now because of, let's be honest, because of social media, the attention spans are short now. And sometimes and it's people in the movement and outside the movement, the attention span is very short. It's hard to keep consistent action and involvement and things going on without somebody shedding blood for people to get in the uproar or want to be involved. In your honest opinion, who are failing? Is it the masses or the people that's per se in the movement? Who's failing who in this situation?
Oh, I think it's the people in the movement. I mean, if you're going to put yourself out there to organize people, then it's up to us to figure out the ways in which people need to be organized, right?
Mm,
If someone is not necessarily interested in doing political work, then what is it that we are not doing right to activate them, right? Marcus
yeah.
Garvey was able to activate people, millions of people through the UNIA. The Panthers were able to activate people. The Nation of Islam was able to activate people. And all of those, a lot of those things took place in different time periods of history. So we're in a particular time period of history where just because there are other things that are distracting people, it doesn't mean that they're not moments where people are activated, i.e., no matter what I think about the Black Lives Matter movement, right? I have my qualms, my issues with it. whether I like it or not, under that banner, there people started rising up and joining and being a part of organizations. Now, part of the problem was that that organization itself uh, didn't intend to be an organization, and it almost had to back into creating structure for something that was at first a hashtag, but it was motivating for people only a few years ago where people started joining. They had chapters all across the country, right?
Hmm.
So there are moments in history where our people still show themselves to want to organize in mass, to want to have something different, right? And so it's up to those of us who have been in movement politics to try to help that along, or to try to find new ways to get people involved, even when the older structures either fail or no, they longer carry on in their goals, or other things happen. Or they're co-opted, right? That still doesn't mean that there's not space for the masses to want to move. Because I think, as you talked about, when someone gets killed, right, you've seen mass reactions in the street. And that's why organizations like ours have to be ready, so that people don't take the wrong turn a lot of times and
Yeah.
go with something that's either what's sexy, what's in the news, what's prominent, but tries to get down with long-term community work, which takes time, which takes effort. But again, it's on upon us to make people see the importance of the work and to show people victories, right? So what's
Yeah.
happening in between those police killings? Are we building institutions? Are we building schools? Are we challenging the state on other measures and winning some victories? Are we doing things that speak to folks culturally, that folks can have fun with, that people can enjoy? Movement space should be space that people enjoy being in, and not necessarily full of contradictions and confrontations, but they should be something that people see themselves getting something out of. And that's on us. That's on us who are politicized, who have a calling to do this work. That's on us to get some other folks to join in with us.
Oh wow, man, you said a mouthful right there, man. I don't know which point the harp on you just made, but let me go with this one then. You mentioned Black Lives Matter. Did we learn from that situation? Like that right there, I don't know if it was intentionally, was it government sponsored, uh to put in there to divert people away from the what we call the real deal. Because right now I felt like the byproduct of Black Lives Matter is going to be a lot of people that would never get involved in the movement again. They gave money, lots of money, for Black Lives Matter to run off with it, and they just gonna throw a wet blanket on all the other grassroots movements out there. And I feel like, how can we prevent in my opinion, I think it was kind of somewhat to a certain extent government sponsored to divert people from the real deal. Uh, like how can we be prepared to handle a situation? You mentioned something, but how can we be prepared to handle another
Yeah.
situation like that, or to prevent another situation like that from happening again?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that, I don't think that Black Lives Matter was a government sponsored trick to stop us from organizing, or to divert us from organizing. But what I do think is that people created a hashtag, people who had access to some resources, people who had access to some capital, and some know-how on how to make something like that fly, right? Something, make it popular, right?
Yeah,
they knew how to brand, as folks like to say now, and it took off. And it took off during a moment where there was actually on the ground organizing happening. Because remember, it was doing Trayvon Martin that the hashtag came out, and there was already organizing in the streets in Florida, when Trayvon Martin was killed. In fact, in some ways, I think if I remember correctly, the NAACP, who I have a lot of criticism for, was on the ground leading a lot of that struggle when Trayvon Martin was killed, right?
yeah,
So there was organizations already there. The hashtag took off on social media. And all of a sudden it became an umbrella slogan, almost like Black Power, right, in the 60s and
Yeah.
70s, right?
Hmm.
And it also, like Black Power, it wasn't necessarily well defined in a lot of people's mind. So for some people, Black Lives Matter meant one thing, and for others, it meant something else, right? And
Correct.
I think there was a time period, again, where there was a lot of people joining, obviously, liberal institutions, right? So let's be clear, liberal institutions, and that's everything from foundations to newspaper, adopted and embraced the Black Lives Matter movement. And this is where I think, if not necessarily a state conspiracy, a conspiracy of interest amongst the elite to capture the movement, right?
Okay.
Movement capture is real, as in we can give you resources, give you fame, give you publicity. And even if you think you're a socialist, you're going to succumb to all of that. And then you're going to start moving directly into policy work only. And for me, one of the major things that I think is a way in which the movement got captured, that movement got captured, is that it went strictly into, or overwhelmingly into, electoral politics, which plays right back into whose hands? The Democratic Party's hands, which means we go right back using the energy of a movement that was on the street now into getting certain people elected to higher office, right? And although there were
Mm.
some challenges to that, and there were many of the affiliates of the Black Lives Matter chapters that broke off later on, because they were like, look, you got all that money and all that money seems to be at the top. How come that money isn't being spread around to all the chapters? So I think there were real people, real organizers, sincere folks who joined the movement. I think there were real people, even with my criticism, who helped start that movement. But I do think in the end there was a sense of movement capture, and as opposed to being organizers in the street, people got, let's say, seduced by resources and a certain limelight, and that led to the breakup of that movement. Whereas there are still individual chapters, right, that people who operate under the name, but as far as a national sort of organization that's working, it doesn't exist now. But again, it goes to show that there are the possibilities are real for movement building. The possibilities are real for national organizing and international organizing. So we shouldn't take from it that it was something that necessarily diverted us from, but we should take from it, in my opinion, is that it was something that almost was. And then what are the mistakes, issues that had happened to make it captured or have it captured, and how can we avoid that again in the future?
Wow. Wow. I'm glad you said that because uh it's good to look back on those things in retrospect and see how can we reformulate the playbook because a lot of the stuff just happened overnight. It's like a spark, and next thing you know, it's like, oh my God, it took off. It's too late to even, get propaganda out about it. But with social media, things spread so fast now. So um, it, I'm glad it's to a point where Black Lives Matter is people are finally caught on to, okay, that's not the route to go anymore with all the things that came out. Uh, it just like it's feel like, man, we got to get back out there, which is not a bad thing to do the groundwork to gain the trust of the people again because of Black Lives Matter. Um, and it just, and I think I think a reason Black Lives Matter happened too is because honestly, I think a lot of the other grassroots movement wasn't doing
Yeah,
their part, you
no,
know.
I think that's true.
Um,
It real quickly,
yep.
there was a point where um, my organization that I was with at the time, a little bit before that, I guess, the Malcolm X grassroots movement was like the leading grassroots black formation in the country.
Mm,
And the organization Black Lives Matter sort of overtook that, and became more popular. Again, it did have certain resources to propel itself, but it did become more popular, right? And so again, we have to look at what were we doing and what we were not doing at that time
yeah.
period. And or in time periods where, again, just recently, last year, the year before, the George Floyd uprising happened. And again, where literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people took to the streets. and they didn't take to the streets under the umbrella of an organization called Black Lives Matter, right? People still are using that symbolism or that name for what they are doing. I personally don't use the name, right? I'm part of the Black Liberation Movement, um, but I think that people still recognize the sort of symbolism of Black Lives Matter as a name to use, but as an
Mm-hmm.
organizational entity, it wasn't even as prominent this time around, let's say, as it was after Trayvon and when Mike Brown was killed also. So I say all that to say is there's still grassroots movements or organizations in various cities and towns. Some of them are working individually, and some of these conversations we've already had. Part of our role is to link up. Part of our
Yeah.
role is to join with each other, is to figure out ways to work closer together so that we can create a national network, if not a national organization, that's in a position to say when these things are happening, we're already on the ground, right? We're not. There's not people who are going to sort of swoop in or come with a hashtag and begin to be leaders of a movement. We already have folks on the ground who are linked up, and that's the way the folks who are doing work locally create national movements, right? So there's no reason why we don't have a national coordinating committee of the different groups that are doing work on the ground, so that we can be prepared for not only if or when another incident happens, but in spite of an incident happening, we're creating our own momentum on the ground, right? Because we're
Yeah.
doing work that's already needed to get done, and we're using the tools of social media to spread the word that these things are happening, right? But that's only going to happen, in my estimation, is when, in America, a lot of times for organizing, because people see the access to branding, or the amount of shine they may get in media, or even or using things like Twitter and all the rest of it. Like, there's an egoism that's been in movement for a while, right? But there's
Mm-hmm.
an egoism that keeps us apart, whether we like it or not, that says, I'd rather be the leader of my organization, which has 7 or 8 people, than being one of several leaders in an organization that has 50 or 60 people. And then you can exponentially, keep climbing up that ladder, as long as people are in a position of willing to share leadership, share ideas, take criticism, receive criticism, give criticism, and still hold the group together, right? To me,
Yeah.
there's nothing more important when we talk about this stuff than saying, how do we hold the organization together that we've built, through disputes, through negative things that may happen, because it's the breaking up of those organizations that other factors love to happen, want to see happen, want to take down. And we can only build a successful liberation movement when we understand it is the unity of organizing that has to survive more than personalities, more than ego. And I think that's one of the things that, even more so than other organizations sort of swooping in, I think that's one of the things that's really telltale of when we're really ready and sincere about building a liberation movement, is when we have a liberation movement that's on the ground, that's in local communities, but that's tied together nationally and, again, internationally.
Exactly. And that's what I took from it too, Kamau. When that's what it's I always had a YouTube channel for the organization. I never used it. I had this YouTube channel back in 2016. Never used it. But I was like, why I'm not using this platform of media? You know, is there I we have something to say. We know what we're doing to a certain extent. Why I'm not on here displaying that, attracting the masses, using it as another tool, you know? And I was like, let me get on here. Like, because I know at one point I was asking other members, like, hey, would you get on YouTube? No, not too many people was all right, man, fuck it. I do it myself. I do it myself, I'm I'm not a person that like to get on camera and believe me, I don't like this. But I see the importance of doing this for several different reasons. One, to spread the ideology, the message of what we're doing to attract more people. Let's be honest, it can bring revenue to the
Yeah,
organization
yeah.
as well as the YouTube channel grow and all those things. And I was like, let me do it my damn self. If nobody else gonna do it, I do it myself because it's too fucking important not to do it. Uh, because like you said, when we look back at what happened, like the media is important. If we got people out here painting their own narrative of certain things, when we can just fucking get on camera ourselves
Mm-hmm.
and do the same damn thing, you know. Like I watch Black Power Media, love it, love it, love it. Watch it in the morning before I go to work. It they you guys get on there, you talk about your own narrative. You frame it the way it should be framed. I don't have to listen to Fox, don't have to listen to CNN. I can just hop on YouTube and listen to you guys tell it, you know, the way it needs to be told. But we don't have enough of that.
Yeah.
We don't have, like, you can probably think of only one hand of people you can, YouTube channels or media places you can go to get that type of message from. And that will really spark me. Like, I get people on Facebook all the time, like, you need you need to talk about, no, I'm not gonna talk about bullshit stuff. I know that's fun and all
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I love the bullshit. I be on Facebook, I be about some bullshit sometimes. But
Yeah.
but when it comes down to business, this is what the fuck I really want to talk about. I I'm dedicated to this. I'm trying to be more consistent because it's too important not to do. And that's what I took from what happened in the past, because it's much needed work um to be done, and this is the way to go, is to spread the message and reach the masses in the best way, in my opinion.
I
So
completely I completely concur. I mean, we got to use what we got. So there's you know, every and things are tools, right? So there's negativity with certain things, but if we use them correctly, they also help support our work. And you know, whether we like it or not, social media is here. Obviously, there's a lot of grandstanding.
mhm.
People are doing it for their individual benefit, but it doesn't mean that organizations can't use it to spread information. Like you said, sometimes people get to catch and hear you who wouldn't have otherwise done it. And so that can bring resources, that can bring membership. I mean, the thing that we always have to remember is you have to diversify these platforms because we don't own them, right? They're
Yep.
not our platforms. And when someone else thinks we're making inroads and we're not controlled by liberal institutions, they will shut us down, right? And so we
Yep.
need to make sure we have
Facts.
used them and use them wisely, that we have alternatives set up, or that we're on a multiple of different platforms, so that if one shuts you down at one point, then hopefully there's another one that you can go to. But the important thing is to know that these are tools that we can use, and we have to be, you know, not only just trained on how to use it, but understand, strategically speaking, the purpose of these tools and how they help us in the ways in which you described.
And speaking of what happened in 2020, how did CMB handle that? Like, specifically with the organization, how did y'all handle 2020? I'm curious about that.
I mean, I think 2020, I mean, we got out in the streets. You know what I mean? We've been doing grassroots organizing in Southwest Atlanta for probably the prior 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
And that was, you know, door knocking, calling meetings, talking about the issue of gentrification. And in Atlanta specifically, his brother Rayshard Brooks was killed at a Wendy's, which was less than a mile away from our community house. So we worked with the local community who had already taken over the Wendy's. That Wendy's was burned
Wow.
down, and 2 or 3 days later, folks from the local community had decided to take it over, and they wanted to turn it, including people from Rayshard Brooks's family, and they wanted to turn the Wendy's into a peace center, a Rayshard Brooks peace center, something to memorialize him and something to add something good to the community. And of course, the city of Atlanta opposed it. The city of
Wow.
Atlanta did everything that it could to convince Wendy's to shut it down. But we worked with those folks, and we created contacts with them, walked the streets with them, called rallies and demonstrations. And so in 2020, in some ways, particularly around the police misconduct issue, for community movement builders, it was almost a coming out party, let's say, to make ourselves wider known or more widely known in
Yeah.
the Atlanta community, both amongst other grassroots organizing groups. Like, the media started picking up things that we were doing. Later on, earlier this year, we joined on a campaign to stop what we euphemistically call Cop City, which basically Atlanta's building the largest training center in the country for police training. And if you look at the Atlanta Police
Wow.
Department vis-a-vis other police departments, the only reason they would want the largest training center is for it to be a hub of police activity. So the very same Black elected officials who claim to be supporting the Black community is actually helping to put in the largest police training center ever. And so we did a lot of work on that case. So 2020 for us and 2021 has been sort of the years of kind of, particularly in Atlanta, sort of breaking out, being more prominent and taking up more space in the organizing scene. Because, as we just spoke about, again, a lot of some of the other organizations that were here for various reasons, again, either dissipated, were no longer doing the organizing that they were doing at one point, had grown smaller. And we were almost like the last sort of Black radical organization standing, at least at that time, who had enough resources and membership to actually lead or play a major role in those campaigns.
Man, that's crazy. Like, and of course you know why, but it's to be in a Black city like Atlanta, and for that to happen, that just lets you know it's more to it than just race. It come down to your ideology and your mindset as well. Because like you just mentioned, you in the blackest, one of the blackest city in the country, and that was shut down. The Wendy's situation, how they want to turn that Wendy's into that, and the city of Atlanta said no with a Black mayor. With at that time she was still the mayor, Keisha Bottoms,
Keisha
right?
Lance Bottoms, that's right.
Yeah. So that lets you know it go deeper than race. Like, of course, we all about being Black first, but then once you get past that, we got to start looking at the ideology these people practice. That because perfect example what you just mentioned. Like at the end of the day, race only plays a certain part. After that, you gotta look. Right? The cliche saying, all skin folks ain't kin folks. So that's the fucking perfect example of that, man. I did not know that happened.
Yeah, I mean, that's why, part of our ideological outlook is around a class analysis, right? Because we can't act like all Black folks are on our side. There are Black folks who have already decided that their interest is with the capitalist state, that they just want to integrate and they want
Mhm.
everybody else to shut up and to sit down and to let them lead. But for them leading means that they're listening to the interests of, particularly in Atlanta, and this is true probably across the country, the white economic elite. And so what you have here in
Mm.
Atlanta is that the Black political elite has teamed up with the white economic elite, and they've decided that they know what's best for the city. And part of knowing what's best for the city means that Atlanta has gone under this Black leadership from a city that's been over 60% Black to a city that's now under 50% Black for the first time in like 40 or 50 years. A city
Wow.
that's teared down all its public housing, a city that's chased out poor people, and a city that's changed so drastically that you can hardly afford to live in Atlanta proper if you are poor or working class.
Wow. And you know what? That's the game plan, the blueprint they rolling out to every city, even out here in the Dallas Fort Worth Metroplex. It's the same thing. It's like, especially in Dallas. I live in Fort Worth, but in Dallas,
Mhm.
20 minutes away. In Dallas, it's the same thing. Black people can't even afford to live within the city confines of Dallas, Texas. They gotta go all the way to the south side or deep south side, like you almost damn near in the unincorporated part of the south side of Dallas. And it's the same thing going on here. And I'm sure in Atlanta they probably way out somewhere else in the city pushing Black folks. It's
Mhm.
they rolling out the same blueprint every major metroplex, everywhere. It's the same blueprint, and 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 I wonder, is that going to cause roadblocks to what we're doing and to the liberation movement?
I mean, it's possible, but there's always going to be enclaves of places where there's going to be Black communities, and so whether or not we're pushed out of central cities, and I think you're right that it's a playbook and it's a plan because it's happening all across the country. So it's no accident. It's not like it's happening in one or two places and you can sit there and examine it. This is kind of like a French model in which poor and working class people, in particular Black poor and working class people, are being pushed to the periphery of large metropolitan areas, which
Mm-hmm.
chases us away from city services, which chases us away from jobs. It chases us away from our friends and our families, access to any services that we may need. But now the motto has been that these corporations want to come back and make these central cities their homes. And so they want to bring their workers into these central cities. And again, the city government is allowing, and not only just allowing, helping to support that happening. Because for a lot of these city governments, for them, they think any change is positive. So anything that removes quote unquote blight, right? Anything that removes a poor neighborhood has to be good. So if they put a Starbucks, that means automatically it's good. If it's shiny and it's bright and it's new, they don't care if that means it's displacing other people. They don't care if the neighborhood, if the change is demographically almost overnight. What they care is that they can say, now there's a shiny new building on the block, and this is what we have, and this is what we've done. And so now we've done our job. Those people are completely brought off from understanding, knowing, accepting, of being a part of any solution that alleviates poverty, that gives power to communities, that brings institutions to communities. Instead, they've sided with these corporations and corporate interests and development interests to make the cities within the model of what those folks want and not what's good for the larger populations of people who actually voted them in year after year after year after year.
Exactly. And let me ask you this, because this bring lead us to my next point. And we was talking about this in political education, and within CMB political education. How do we bring about the contradictions of the state? What can we do to what programs can we create to bring about their contradictions? Like, sometimes if we do certain things, it show the masses of the people that the state is against us. Like the programs you do, I'm sure the city of Atlanta gave you pushback on that. That pushback showed the masses of the people or how fucked up the system is. So what are those programs? Because I want this answer for myself, and maybe I'm thinking too hard on it, but you're a vet in the game. You can probably think of it like this and give me the answer. What are those programs we can bring to bring about contradiction? The first thing come to my mind real quick is I think about Batula Shakur, the programs he had with the helping
Acupuncture.
people, yeah, helping people get clean, the acupuncture and all that type of stuff. Those things brought the state in to try to shut that down and show the masses of the people the contradictions with the country or the state in that area. Do you have any ideas of programs that we can do in Atlanta or out here in Dallas that can do the same things?
I mean, a lot of it, of course, is going to be trial and error, right? And a lot of it is going to be what is necessary, or after you do sort of an evaluation of your local conditions, what do you think is needed to explain or to show those contradictions? And just quickly to go historically speaking, right? You had the Black Panther Party, right, through the breakfast program, was showing the contradictions of young people who are going to school hungry because they didn't have enough resources at home and the schools weren't supplying any food for them either. But yet people were sent to school hungry and somehow they were supposed to learn, right? And the Panthers was like, this is a way to not only provide, as they call it, survival programs, but not only to provide people with food, but to politicize them around the nature of how the capitalist system works. Later on, we had the Young Lords, who they were looking for like something sexy to do, right? They wanted to figure out what was the sexy thing to do. And then they said they did a survey in the community and people kept complaining about garbage not being picked up. And so they gathered all the garbage and burnt it in the street. right? And this became a big commotion, a big issue, and the city and the state had to respond. Ocean Hill, Brownsville, back in the 70s, where parents started saying, we want control over the education of our young people, which means not only do we want to have a hand in choosing the curriculum, we want to choose who teaches our kids. A contradiction that the city provides the resources, but doesn't provide a curriculum that speaks to Black youth and Puerto Rican youth or Latino youth at the time, and doesn't provide teachers who look like the Black or Latino youth who are in those schools, right? So to these days, some of the things that we do around some of the issues is like we do the mutual aid work. So we're going door to door, giving out food and toiletries to people with political education, talking about that during a pandemic, the city cannot even get resources to people to help them feed themselves. During a time period when people have been told to socially distance, the city is not doing anything to provide the proper resources so that you can socially distance in a way that keeps you hungry, that keeps you sheltered. With the mutual aid, we also do a stabilization fund where we give, again, up to about $750 a month to a household so they can pay a utility bill or rent or mortgage bill, because that way it shows, look, we have to provide a lot of our own solutions. And that way we can try to politicize people. When we do the organizing campaigns against Cop City or against police brutality, and as we're doing those, we're also doing the safety programs and the cop watches in the community to show what alternative force can be that gives us a separation from the police. So we have to think about what are the things that our community needs. What are we in a position to do with the limited resources that we may have? And some of it may not, it's not always going to be something that either gets you media or gets you a lot of attention in the community, but it'll be something that if you build up over 2, 3, 4, 5 years, it makes you a staple in the community. And I will say that we have became, we challenged the city council person in the community that we do our work in, who not only supported the Cop City idea, but actually was the sponsor of the Cop City idea. And this was a Black city council person who kept saying, and where Rashard Brooks was killed in her district, but kept saying, we need more training, we need more cops, we need more training. We continually, with other organizations, challenged her. She did not like that. She tried to shut down our access to the community garden, which is a city garden that we were the caretakers of for over 5 years, when the city itself left that park abandoned, and we put our own resources to rebuild that park. She, along with some other gentrifiers, tried to take that park away from us. We challenged her publicly, we challenged her privately. And again, even though we don't do a lot of electoral politics work, right? That's really not the area of work that we've done a lot of stuff in. But we supported individuals supported in different ways her challenger. And because of some of the ways we were able to highlight the contradictions of her in particular, this young individual, he did a great job of having a ground game and being connected to the community. But I do think we played some role in displaying her contradictions to the community. And her and another longtime city council person who are folksy city council folks, but who have obviously sided with capital, they were replaced, right, after 20 years in those jobs. And so sometimes, even when you don't expect it, and believe me, we did not necessarily expect that victory. So even when you don't expect it, your work may have ramifications because other people are seeing it, because when it does, it may catch news. It may cause to show the contradictions between what somebody who is saying they support the community, but what they're actually doing is happening on the ground. And so, you got to pick the things that you think are going to highlight the contradictions that are happening around, bring people in, hopefully, into movement and political organizing. And I think that's the road that you take in order to show people that movement work is necessary and needed.
I'm gonna challenge you on this because you already showed that it can work. You guys out there in Atlanta, in that Pittsburgh neighborhood, y'all supposed to have y'all own in place city council person, man. Y'all run the show there. Y'all supposed to handpick somebody. You okay? This is our agenda. Here you go. Go win the race, man. Y'all can
You're
do it.
right. No, you're right. But we were not there yet, right? So
Yep.
you're right. That's exactly what we should be doing at some point. Part of the work has to have an electoral strategy to it, as well as grassroots organizing, as well as stability planning and mutual aid work. There are different components, as well as security and self defense. There is different components to movement organizing.
Mm-hmm.
But no, we were not there yet to train a candidate and do it, to have somebody come from our organizing background and to do it. But
I know.
we got somebody else who has some. We supported somebody else eventually who has some of those things, and that's not to say that we think this person is going to always do the right thing.
Yeah.
But as we get to the point of being able to do that, what you said, and I think you're completely correct, we should be. We will take this small victory, but it's not the major victory that I think we still can have at hand if we do the right things.
Now, have anyone came to you? Yeah. I mean, hey, I can see you in some type of. I can see them coming to you in Atlanta. They haven't. I know they approach you though.
To do what? To run for office?
Some type of office.
Oh no, yeah. I don't. I mean, that's not my role. My role is to be an organizer. That's my
Of
role.
course, but I
Yeah.
know they approach you though. They.
I mean, other people in the past have asked me about running for office and all that kind of stuff. I've been called like the Obama look, so all that kind of
Oh,
stuff. It's just not my thing. You know what I mean? Like I don't see myself. That there would have to be some special reason, but I just don't see that as
yeah.
my particular role.
Yeah, I don't see it either, man. You too valuable to the boots on the ground. I definitely wouldn't want that to happen. Um, but yeah, man, it's really crazy out here that and those points you mentioned are very true. You gotta every city, every metroplex is different. The needs are different from even in the same city, from one black community to another black community in the same city is different. But this is my struggle right here, and maybe you've had some of the same struggles. My only thing is for things to truly change, it's gonna take the people that we are helping to overall bring those changes. And sometimes I'm gonna be honest, I get frustrated.
Oh
You
yeah.
do these programs, you do this, you giving that, and it just feel like oh my god, like they just taking out. Why they not getting involved? Why they not moving at the pace I want them to move? I done came out here 4 or 5 times and they still just taking that. They're not showing interest in being involved in their own area. Even like they say trash. You go in the neighborhood, you pick the trash up. You do that 5 times, and you still don't get nobody in their own community to come help you pick the trash up. Then after a while, you looking at you and your comrades, you're like, man, fuck this shit. I ain't doing this shit no more. They ain't coming out here and helping pick up the trash. Like, how can we get through that? Like, we only human as well too. After a
Oh
while,
yeah.
we like, man, fuck this shit. Like, how can we get through that?
No, I mean, you got to know what your purpose is and why you're doing that work, right? So, and you got to be, what's the work that's going to be best designed to get results. And sometimes you're right. You do programs or you make efforts, and you're like, you know what? This is just turned into our group picking up trash for people. So we need to figure out another example or way to get that work done, right? And again,
Mm-hmm.
it could be something that's either more in your face or explosive, but it may be some other area, maybe a child care center, right? It may be again a breakfast program. It may be again a cot watch. There may be other things that you could do. I know youth work is usually one of the most successful ways to connect with the community, because that includes getting parents involved and young people involved. And a lot of times that work is a way, an in to working with and talking to the community. But we also got to remember, like, folks have their own struggles. That's one reason that the
Yeah.
state depends on to make sure that people don't have time to come out and organize, is that people are hustling to feed themselves, to clothe themselves. They're hustling to have a good time. They're hustling just to relax because some of them are working a couple of jobs, right? Or they got their career hustle on because the society has told them that the most important thing they can be is famous and have on shiny new clothes and medallions or whatever it is, right? So all these things are taking up space in people's heads, some worthwhile, some not.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can't get discouraged because we haven't yet found the click or the thing. And I tell people sometimes too, it's like, well, if you can't move yet, the folks who are not politicized, at the very least, then focus on the politicized people that you have. And how do you, when people are politicized, find them a home in your organization so that even by the growth in that way, you begin to attract people who are interested in it, but they have not found a way to join yet, right? But
Yeah.
you got historical precedent. We have brothers like Malcolm who walked the streets and went in front of churches and just chopped it up with people, right? We've got the other folks in the Panther Party. I've had conversations in the past with Kathleen Cleaver, who talk about how when folks were selling newspapers and those were ways to have introductory conversations to move people a little bit left, a little bit more radical, a little bit more nationalist to who they want, so that folks want to join. And sometimes it's not always a service program. Sometimes it's something like that, like a conversation. Sometimes it's a barbecue that people come out to. Sometimes it's like you're going to the neighborhood association meetings and you're starting to chop it up with people who are already slightly involved and trying to move them a little bit. So what are the avenues for politicizing people? What are the avenues for doing things that people can get involved in? And again, sometimes that stuff may fail, but you may find something that starts to bring people along. And so I think you just got to keep on figuring that out, right? Figuring out what are those avenues, what are those programs.
Man, bruh, you said a lot with that. Man, that hit home. I just want you to know that hit home. And I think it hit home. It's gonna hit home with a lot of people that's watching. Cause someone is gonna watch this like, damn, that makes sense. And so we probably didn't save somebody from giving up. We really have, man, because that's a lot of people in the movement need to hear that, because it can be daunting, it can get exhausting. You just want to give up sometimes,
Yeah.
um, when you're looking at people mindsets not changing or not changing in the pace you want it to change, because you came to your own awareness at a certain speed and you like, man, why did I get it? Why it's not clicking and all this and that, and like you said, we just got to find those points that touch a person in a different way and then touch them at the right time. So it's important to keep reinforcing ourselves while we involve, reinforcing we need to try different methods, reinforcing uh, all those different things, to look at it from a whole different perspective, from another lens if we need to, because I guarantee you, I'm not the only one that's probably thinking the same thing, and I appreciate you. That's wisdom right there. But overall, we about to wrap this up, and I just want to let you ask one more thing. Like, uh, what is your thoughts on the state of Black America right now, with where things are at, and where you see it, is going right now?
I mean, as I think about it, I think we're in a 40 or 50-year sort of special period, particularly in this
Mm.
country. But obviously, there's impact around the world. Like, I think we've come out of an era of deindustrialization, of minimum wage jobs, or even working class jobs, which have been sent out to like places like Mexico and then China, and are never going to return to the United States. We've come through the Great Recession in the United States, and now even the first Black president and now our vice president, right? And during this time period, most importantly at this particular time period, we're seeing a demographic shift in America, where the white majority population is beginning to decrease. And I don't like this term so much, but folks of color are beginning to increase, right? And for white folks, that's scary as hell for them. They don't like that. And as we've seen, a majority of white folks have retreated back to, let's say, overt white supremacy, right?
Oh
Things
wow.
that we haven't seen since the 1930s and 40s, or 1930s and 40s, yeah, 30s and 40s and 50s, where folks would openly march, and it display their white supremacy or display their racism in large numbers, right? To the point where they elected an overt white supremacist president who, even when folks, the media was telling us this time around that this person was so destructive to the body politic that Joe Biden would come in as moderate and overwhelm him. Joe Biden barely won that election, right? Republicans held on to a number of their seats. So we're witnessing a time period where the whatever so-called social contract that exists, not only between Black Americans in America, but white Americans in America, is slowly eradicating and coming apart. I feel we have to be prepared for that, because I feel that, one of the things is that these folks are preparing, whether we like it or not. They're preparing in ways which are dangerous to us as a people and as a community. And they are connected and tied to state apparatuses. In fact, sometimes you can't tell them apart. You can't tell apart white militias a lot of times from white police departments. So we have to be worried and concerned. So as we do some of the little things around, well, I shouldn't say little things, but the important things around surviving and building out some of these organizational structures, we have to think about how do we put in place structures now that will be there for us in 10 years for when we need them. And again, I mean that as in self-defense. I mean that in terms of food sustainability. I mean that as in educational structures. I think we're looking at a change that could mean a ripping apart. I mean, America's the most powerful republic that has ever been on the planet, right? But we're also looking at a slow change, not only in that power apparatus, but the divisions here in what's considered the United States in settler colonialism, which I think are going to have strong ramifications for the next 20 to 30 years, which I think could be an even more dangerous period.
And that's very true. And I'm glad that brothers like me and you, we're starting to connect, and you just being coming slowly and more involved with community movement builders. I see the vast network of great people within your network, your community, your organization, man. I'm gonna be honest, it gave me a renewed spirit in the fight. Like, I've been connected with several CMB members and messaging them. We talking to you. I'm like, man, these are some smart brothers and sisters. I'm like, my God, the work they doing. I'm like, I'm over here. I'm on Instagram all day on y'all Instagram page. I'm looking at ideals. I'm even stealing y'all posts and stuff and reposting some Black empowerment. I'm adding them as friends and messaging them. They like, man, who is this nigga, man, messaging those? Like, I'm like, man, I'm with y'all now, man. We all one now, bro. I'm like, hey, so I'm like, man, I got a renewed spirit, man. I'm gonna have to, as soon as I get off this live, man, I'm gonna hit y'all fed up. I'm like, hey, man, brother, hey, look, we gotta get you back out here in these streets. This is what we got going on. Hey, Kamau, I'm still working on them, man. I'm gonna work on them. That's gonna be my little hobby. That's gonna be my little hobby right there, to get them back involved.
He gave me a text and said that he was taking a little break and he's gonna get back involved. I was like,
I'm ready to call him. Hey, as soon as we get off, I'm gonna call him. I'm gonna put the pressure on him, man. He'll be back right, man. He'll be back right. But
he's too valuable. He's too valuable. Just the way you're too valuable. Just the things that you've built, the things that you've already done, the things that you've grown. Right? We can't lose that stuff. Like, we get. You're right. We get tired. We get depressed. We get upset. But the enemy wants to make it hard, right? And quitting only makes it harder for those who remain behind. So we got to figure out if something is too hard or it's not working right. Then again, like you're saying, what are the ways in which we connect to each other to make that work easier for each other, right? What are the ways we connect to each other to make that work even more exciting because of the possibilities of meshing together and doing more work together? So, that's on us again. We got to find those ways. And if we feel like, right now we're not able to reach all of the masses that we want, again, connecting with other political organizations and folks on the ground and folks who come from these communities is extremely important and making sure that there's a national formation, that there's national formations that can get this work done. And I think that also is a strong part of the work that we got to make sure happens.
Man, already, and I see my boy Ace from Black Royal Family in Dallas. All power to the people. Yes, indeed, brother. All power to the people. That's my brother Ace in Dallas. He's doing a lot of great things out there in Dallas. I'm gonna have to link up with you, Ace, man. We're gonna have to click clack, BM, CMB, Black Royal Family, man. We're gonna have to. I'm gonna get out there and work with you out there in Dallas. We're gonna definitely do the damn thing. And Kamau, I know we've been a little over out, but I want to
all right.
parting words, brother. Tell us anything you want to tell us, what you got going on, any type of shout out announcements you want to make regarding CMB. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I just again want to thank you for having me. If people want to reach us, our website is communitymovementbuilders.org. We're on all the social media things, and that this work is the paramount work of our time and for our people. So we got to continue to do this kind of work. We got to continue to build. We got to figure out how to work together. We got to figure out how to mesh ideological positions. All of that is for us to figure out, because there's those who don't take this work seriously, but the people who don't take it seriously, trust me, they're not the people who work for the state. The state takes us seriously, even when we don't. The state understands that there's been times in history where Black movements have risen up and they feel threatened by that, because we are well placed to throw monkey wrenches into the plans of basically an international empire, right? So our work is serious, even if we always don't take it that seriously. The state takes our work seriously. And so we got to build as if there's something to build for. And I think that's the role of organizations like yours and organizations like mine and other organizations out there. We got to figure out how to build together, even when it hurts.
And with you saying that, man, I know we're about to boogie out, but man, you hit it home. and it hit home with me back in 2000 and I want to say 17, that when Rakim Balagoon made a Facebook post about Michael Xavier and saying positive things about Michael Xavier, that's when I knew it was serious. When they came in the middle of the night, 2-3 a.m. and kicked his door in and kidnapped Rakim in the middle of the night for a Facebook post, and had him in federal prison for 6 months with no charges. I was like, this is some Gestapo Nazi shit, You just going you getting people in the middle of the night and taking them to federal prison without a judge or nothing, a hearing, no nothing. And then when he went to court, it comes out they was following him and other people in the Dallas-Fort Worth area for 2 years. 2 years. They was following him, tracking him, watching his moves. The Facebook post wasn't the first. It was years before that. And it hit home to me like, these folks really take this shit serious and they watching us. Like COINTELPRO, when that shit happened, I like COINTELPRO never left.
That's right.
Never left.
That's right.
And that was my wake-up call. That's right. And the wake-up call for a lot of people, they stopped being involved in the movement when that happened out here. And Rakim can testify this to himself. People turned their back, they stopped being involved. At first, it was like you had people more willing to be involved, but when that Rakim situation happened out here, niggas disappeared. They disappeared. I was like, oh hell, I know who was real and who was fake and who ain't with the shits. And that was my wake-up call. And that was my wake-up call. But on that note, folks, we're gonna have to do this shit again, bro.
Let's do it again, man. Let's do it again.
And I just want to say, folks, hey, if you like what you see, share the video, subscribe, like all that shit. We're gonna have some more discussions like this. We're gonna have Kamau back. We're gonna have other great guests. But at the end of the day, I just want to say all power to the people. Till we see you next time. Hey, y'all have a good night. Peace.
Peace.